Hey guys, how's it going? This is my third video, and today we're going to be talking about the old T-62A, the original Tier 10 Soviet medium. Nowadays, you can't really, throw a stone down the road without it skipping past at least, six or seven Tier 10 Soviet mediums. But this was the first one, I believe, and then later came the 140, and then, the other 15 of them, or however many there are. This first clip here is it's not a full, well, it is a full game for me, but this is me just kind of showing how I play this tank. Kind of really aggressive. I don't always recommend it, but it's a lot of fun. We'll kind of talk about it and kind of why it works in this kind of a play style, circumstances depending, and why it's really enjoyable and what this tank does well. So enjoy this first clip. It's pretty short. At the end, there's a leopard driver who really doesn't appreciate my shenanigans. I'm playing like an idiot here. I lose a lot of health at the beginning. I knew there was a light tank spotting me, and I just kept getting too greedy. So kind of unfortunate. Could have been a even better game. So the T-62A, really unique. These Russian mediums with the 100 millimeter guns. Lowest alpha at tier 10. More than light tanks. There's not a single tier 10 to my knowledge, with the exception of like an autocannon like the T249 that does less than 320. And the low alpha, it's hard to play with, in this game because, these have phenomenal DPM and rate of fire, but at the end of the day, if you're not able to fire on reload, well, aren't you just better off with, a gun that does, 400 or 440 or, anything more? And the answer is yeah. You to get the most out of these vehicles, you have to keep the guns firing. So they're pretty low skill floor. I can't really phrase it that way. These tanks are easy to do very bad, and I think if you took the average player from this game and put them in all the tier 10 mediums, they'd probably do the worst in these because you know it takes a little bit of map knowledge sometimes, or a little bit of something like you're saying here, where I'm hold down while not having to use gun depression. I'm actually elevating my gun to shoot these guys. It takes a little bit of elbow grease sometimes to make these things work. But when they work, you can see here, I'm just ruining these heavies down. I'm farming the crap out of them. This poor Type 5, this E100, that Foch. It's takes a bit of finesse. And yeah, the leopard here, he's had it. He said, "Nah, your game's over, pal." And yeah, you know, uh, I shouldn't have given away all my health at the beginning. I might have been able to survive that, but my team in the back's giving good fire here, and we end up winning the game later. So what are the strengths of the T-62? When it came to the game, I think Russia, like I said previously, Russia was, I think, the fourth nation introduced. So you had this would be the fourth medium line. You had, actually, correction, I think this might have came in before British mediums, but let's just pretend they were in the game, right? So you had four medium tank lines. Now you had the Germans, which were about accurate, punchy guns. With They're supposed to have good hull armor. That didn't really happen until the E50, but the Panther and the Panther 2 tried to, right? The Americans were great view range and good gun depression, but they're kind of slow, but great gun handling on the move. Firing on the move, the Pershing, the M46, the M48, good stuff. And then the Brits. So the British, with the Centurion line, kind of got their flavor at tier 8, which was even slower than the Americans, but even more gun depression. They had 10 degrees, as where the M48, I believe, had 9. I think it still does have 9. And even stronger turrets. The M46 and the M40, before they had their turrets buffed, they didn't have strong turrets, right? So that was the British thing, is heavily armored turrets, good gun depression, while still having good guns and Hesh, right? So what the Russians bring, so these tanks were different than all the other mediums because they didn't really have good armor in the holes at all, but they had really good turrets. So, okay, kind of like the British, but they had no gun depression at all, right? So the other thing they had going for them is really good camo and good maneuverability and high DPM rapid fire low alpha guns, which is a really interesting combination of things to put together. So the T-62A comes into the game, and it's got a really, really, really good turret, and it still does. But at the time, before the extreme, nice fire there, the extreme prevalence of premium ammunition, this thing was like a pocket IS-7. Man, you go hold down in this, and it's just bounce city. Like even up to around 300 pen, if you're moving and they hit a rounded part of the turret, they're not going to get through. And it wasn't ever the case where the turret was bad. It was just getting into a position where you can make the turret work. Again, you can see I'm using like a dip in the ground here to kind of go hold down against some of these tanks. You can't just go on a ridge like you can with a Centurion or a Patton or something else, Krang Vong, and those other tanks with good gun depression. You have to really know your positions. These are low profile with crap gun depression. The stealth on these and the maneuverability made them, and they still are, really kind of easy to move around if you like your stealthy tanks. These are some of the best for mediums in the game. I think my still concealment with this is around 286 or something like that. And on the move concealment as well is going to be pretty good. So you're really good at flanking. Stealth just doesn't just mean you have to sit at the back and snipe. You can do that with these tanks. They have great shell velocity and accuracy, but the problem with that is sniping even more than ever means alpha is king, because the reality is the lower your alpha, the less damage you're going to do only when you're sniping. In a situation like this, I'm not sniping. I'm up at the front. I'm shooting a lot on reload. The DPM here is phenomenal, but alpha, it doesn't really matter too much. But what happens when you're sniping in the back? A target gets spotted. They know they're spotted. They think, crap, I need to get into cover. Kind of like this guy right here, right? You get one shot, and then they're back in cover, and you're not firing on reload. So if I shoot 4 times in a game with 320 alpha because I'm sniping, right, and I only shoot at 4 targets before they back into cover, I've only done, around 1,300 damage. Now, if I'm playing in my Grill 15 and I shoot 4 times in a game, I've done almost 3,000 depending on damage rolls, right, over 2,800, because I'm hitting for 750, which is a decent game at almost 3,000, and barely doing over 1,000 with a low alpha gun. It's not great. So there's a time and place for it, but just if you have lower alpha, just know you're de facto a worse sniper. So it's kind of why I think these tanks people struggle with, because and they're not popular. It's why the FV405 is super popular in this game, and other tanks like that with stupid high alpha, because you have to shoot 3 times in a game, you've had a good game, and I'm not going to rag on the average player and be all high and mighty and they need that alpha damage to do well. No, I mean, look, the game's hard to do well in, and you could still have a crap game even if you do play a high alpha tank, and they have their drawbacks. But the barrier to entry with high alpha damage like that, it's a lot lower than something like this. I mean, that was a great game, and like I said, I played really aggressive. I went on the heavy flank. I do that a lot with this tank, and I just like to keep that gun singing. And sometimes it goes great, like this game, and other times not so much. Um, so after this was introduced, like I mentioned, the Object 140 came into the game, and these two were kind of near peers for a long time. So the strength of the Object 140 compared to the 62 is you gave up some of your turret armor because you had a weaker turret, both in terms of the strong areas weren't as strong, and also your cupolas were more prominent, and you had an overmatchable roof, I believe, back in the day. So you got a worse turret, and you also, I believe, no. Yeah, you gave up the turret, but what you gained for in exchange was an extra degree of gun depression. You got 6 degrees instead of 5, and that, I can't explain it any other way than saying this. 1 degree when you're going from 5 to 6 isn't just 1 degree. That's 20% more gun depression, and it is noticeable. We'll get to why in a second, but it was also faster. So if you wanted the more heavily armored of the 2 tanks with the same gun and still good mobility, you want the T-62A. And if you wanted something that was a bit more flexible with the gun depression and the top speed, you want the 140. So there was a bit of a balance, and they still mostly played the same, but you couldn't sit still, hold down in a 140 as comfortable as you could with the T-62A, and you weren't quite as fast and agile in the T-62 as you were with the 140, and you're less flexible with the positions you could play. So, just like all these other tanks, over time, new tanks come into the game. These become power creep, and the T-62A went through some pretty crazy changes, of which, noticeably, really have left the Object 140 as kind of irrelevant, honestly, today. So, first off, looking at it, it has quite a bit of health. 2050, that's kind of insane. It's a small tank. I don't know why it has so much health. It had an engine boost, so it got a new top engine that just gave it way more horsepower, so it just gets around really quick. And it also got its top speed increase, so now it's either just as fast as or faster than the Object 140. It also got a DPM buff. It has crazy DPM. I think I'm like just over 3,500 DPM with this tank. The gun handles better, and most notably, the thing that really kind of put the nail in the coffin for the 140 is that this got 6 degrees of gun depression. So all the strengths of the 140 are gone. This had better speed, the same gun depression, a better gun, and better armor. But not to say the 140 is a bad tank. It's still a good tank. It's just, there's not a reason to play it when you can get this. Hoping they look at that at some point and kind of give that thing some sort of treatment, some sort of love. So that brings us to, where does this tank stand today? So I've kind of talked about it a bit. I don't think these tanks are ever going to be really popular because they have a really, really high skill ceiling and a pretty high barrier to entry. Um, I guess you can call it a high skill floor. I just think a lot of people do poorly with these, and they're not as palatable as higher alpha tanks. Even other mediums. All the 105s recently got buffed. Almost all the 105s got buffed to 420 alpha. I mean, that's 100 more. That's over, what is that, 33% more alpha per shot than this. So, these you really got to work hard to make sure, like in this game here, I'm really working the flanks, I'm not just going up front and face trading. That's how you have to play these things. Either as kind of opportunistic snipers, that one's kind of the hardest to pull off. The best case scenario is something like this, where you're a flanker, and I messed this up. I should have perma-tracked this guy. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought maybe I could hit his ammo rack and blow his top off, but could have perma-tracked him there. But as a flanker role, yeah, working flanks of guys and just brutalizing DPM, that's what these tanks are really, really good at. Or you do what I do and play as a pocket heavy like the last game, and you go forward and you play kind of like a maniac, and kind of like in that opening clip as well. So I think it's a very strong tank. I think played by really good players. It's one of the stronger mediums. It's not the best medium in the game. That probably goes to either like the Murat or the Centurion Action X. They're just more flexible on more maps. Here you're going to see me work a ridgeline as best as I can with the T-62A. I hate Vanguards. This tank is hard to make work on a ridgeline, so you're going to see me struggle. And then here, oh boy, tier 10 tank destroyer yelling you for damage. You hate to see it, but it is what it is. Thankfully, this guy wasn't I don't want to say he's a bad player, but I had some T support to help me survive this situation, because this is a close game right now, and it has been for a little bit. I knew I had to really kind of make an impact in this game if we were going to win it, because the other flanks kind of been stagnant. The enemy team kind of seemed like they were winning. So this guy here is really trying to YOLO me, but a couple shots come in and kind of dissuade him of just straight up, coming down, shooting me and face hugging. So one of the other things that I briefly mentioned it, after the recent universal DPM changes and rate of fire nerfs, this is one of the few tanks in the game that could actually still perma-track people. All the 105 mil medium tanks at this tier, they have about, somewhere between like a 7 and 9 second reload, I want to say. Really not a whole lot of leeway in there. That's just not quite good enough to perma-track. Almost everyone has a skill in their commander that repairs their tracks faster, and then they can run the additional increase to module repair, and they can run food, all of which, increases the speed at which you repair your tracks. So this thing right here, you're looking at, what is that, a 5.4 second reload. And if I have my food active, it's probably closer to 5, and that's just good enough to actually perma-track most people, unless they have all the repair going on. And it's fun. It's really funny. If you like, I've had people come around corners, and I track them with their front drive wheels, and before their gun can get around the corner, and then they don't have the repair kit. It's on cooldown, and you just sit there and farm. And like I said, 3,500 DPM. It's immensely satisfying. You can't do it with other tanks, and that's why I like these Soviet mediums. The rapid fire low alpha, it's a breath of fresh air. It's one of the things about the game that's really cool is I feel like more so back in the day when there were less tanks, each nation really did feel unique. It had its own flavor. I talked about the Germans, the Brits, and the Americans at the start and what these tanks brought to it. And it's no fault of wargaming their tanks, but once you start introducing all the different tank lines in the game, there's only so many ways you can dress up a pig before they kind of start looking the same. It's kind of evolved to all the new tanks are just strong turrets, good gun depression, things like that. And that's fine. It is what it is. But I love these because they're unique. They're fun to play. There's a couple ways you could play them. Again, a lot of factors have to go right if you're going to go be a maniac on the heavy flank with this, like I've shown. But I recently had gotten this 3 marked. It's one of my most played tanks. I had it 2 marked for a very, very long time, and just got onto a string of really good games. And it's a lot of fun. It's fast, it's stealthy, it's got good DPM, great on the move accuracy, great heat rounds, as you can see here in that opening clip. There's not a whole lot to complain about other than the lack of gun depression and the really crap hull armor. So the T-62, thankfully, really good spot in 2026. I think it's one of the better picks. If you're looking to have fun at tier 10, try something new. If you've done a lot of Western type vehicles, I definitely recommend picking these up, giving it a shot. And yeah, 6.2k damage, only a second class mastery with 3 kills and 6.2. And I was shooting for the most part tier 10s there. It's not like I was bowling some tier 8s. So a lot of fun. Highly recommend it. Look forward to talking about some more tanks. Hope you guys enjoyed it. You guys take it easy and take care of yourselves.